Hi there, and welcome to Cashroom's participation in the National Conveyancing Week. Today I'm going to talk about maximising efficiency and minimising risk, the strategic advantages of outsourcing, something that we do a lot of, and particularly in the conveyancing sector, we've got about 250 law firm clients, and the vast majority of those clients do some kind of property transaction processes, whether that's commercial property, residential conveyancing, which we do a huge amount of, or things like remortgage, etc. So we do have a view on it. And who am I? So I'm Alex Holt. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Cashroom. I'm an ex-partner in a couple of big law firms. I've been where law firms sit, and I know therefore some of the pains that come from it. We've sort of set out as a business to provide compliant, cost-effective finance solutions. We say worldwide, it's because we've got offices now in the US, but we've been supporting law firms in the UK particularly for over 14 years. We've got about 120 members of staff, and that's qualified cashiers, chartered accountants, lawyers, technology experts, HR, all the things that you would expect. And I think that as a result of working in that sector for so long, as well as the experience I've got prior to Cashroom, we do have quite a unique take on the legal sector and how various things impact it. So hundreds and hundreds of law firms outsource their finance function, not just to ourselves, but to other entities as well. And, you have to consider, well, why are they doing that? Obviously, things have changed over the last few years, but in particular, these seem to be key areas and key reasons. They're looking to find an expert team. Legal cashiering is not something that is thick on the ground as far as expertise is concerned. Anybody who's tried to recruit cashiers in recent times will have discovered that it's not easy. It's also not easy to find people who are particularly expert on your own practice management system or that are bang up to date with regulation. So taking the resource from an expert outsourcer means that you're kind of passing that headache on. So monitoring and supervising cashiering is not something that lawyers do naturally because it's not their specialist area. And equally, it therefore creates a risk. So part of the reason for outsourcing as well is to reduce risk. And in the conveyancing world, reduction of risk is something that's absolutely paramount. Given the problems that everybody has around obtaining professional indemnity insurance and keeping the premiums at the right level, any reduction of risk profile can obviously help the firm. It makes compliance easier. In the end, as an ex-lawyer, I remember the hardships of the rules around client money. Those rules have only tightened over the years and got more and more complex. And if you're the COFA now in a law firm and you're trying to manage, conveyancing transactions and make sure client money is being handled properly, then having expert help to create that and to ensure that is absolutely a massive benefit. It can also support firms who are growing quickly, and again, that the property and conveyancing sector is one that has seen real growth and real spurts of growth over the last 4 or 5 years. And in the end, if your firm grows by 20% and therefore you have 20% more transactions to get through, you need a significantly bigger cashiering function to make sure that those payments are going through smoothly and risk avoidantly. We, just to put it in context, transferred around £20 billion of law firm clients' money last year. So when you're looking to reduce risk, you've got to consider particular areas of risk that relate to your firm. You've got your people, and in the cashiering sense, in the finance function sense, that's a risk in and of itself around internal fraud, but also the risk of them being fooled by someone from a cyber perspective, and that's where technology can come in. You've got the systems that are being brought in, which are designed to create better workflows and better ways of working, but in some instances the accounts parts of those systems are complex and need specialist attention. When you've got those systems in, you want to understand whether your process is up to date and is optimal, whether you're actually complying with the rules, not just as they were 2 years ago, but as they are now with the introduction of GDPR strictures and increased strictures, that is, and increased AML regulation. You've got reputational risk if you get these things wrong, and disaster is the word there. But disaster recovery. What is your plan if you suddenly don't have a resource in your cashiering and finance function? So the question is, how do you assess your risk? And my answer would be a very quick 3-step risk audit. So first of all, consider the assets in your firm. This is a methodology that I've lectured on a number of times, so apologies for those who've seen it before, but it is very popular. If you were to take a blank piece of paper and do some columns on your paper, and the first column would be the assets of your firm, and I would suggest that the assets of your firm, and most firms, will be a combination of the following. They will be cash, so your money in and of itself, your staff, your property. For some people that's more important than others, obviously. For your data, your software and hardware, your reputation, and your clients. And obviously, as I say, firms look at these things and have different priorities and different kind of weightings of those for different firms. For example, firms that operate hybrid working might mean that their property is not quite as important. In other words, their office space, because everybody's working remotely. But equally, if you're a boutique firm that has very, very highfalutin, complex property transactions, then your staff could be absolutely your key asset, because if you've got really complex matters and your top lawyers suddenly depart, that's a huge risk. So then the question is, how do you assess that risk? So first of all, what form? So next column, what form does each asset take? Is it physical? Is it digital? Is it verbal? And again, using an example, if you think about data, then for many law firms, what you've got is physical data, still hold some things on paper. You've got some digital data, obviously, within your systems. And worryingly, in some instances, you do still have verbal data or intangible data. And that may be, for example, some knowledge being held simply in the head of your cashier who's been doing it for years and years. And I would suggest that's a huge risk. You need to make sure that there isn't somebody who's just got answers in their head and it's nowhere else. And then the final column would be to assess each of those assets as far as to whether they are critical, important, or not important. And again, for each firm that will differ. Again, if you're a system-based and kind of process-based conveyancing practice, then your technology is absolutely critical. If you can't operate without it, as we saw with the issues at the end of last year for firms that suffered. And as a result, once you've assessed all those things in that list, what you should end up with is a table that gives you an outline view of what really is critical and important and how these things are being held within your business. Once you've got that, then you can actually start considering where you place that finite sort of resource of time, effort and funds, and really start focusing on the areas that are quick wins, the ones that are perhaps more expensive but are crucial, and you start being able to plan around those things and use this as a basis for discussion. So when you look at reducing risk, what are you really looking at? So in relation to your people, I would say that recruitment is a crucial thing. And particularly in your finance function, what you're often looking at is the recruitment of, for example, a cashier. I would not have a clue as an ex-lawyer how to recruit a cashier and know whether they are good, bad or indifferent at cashiering. Frankly, it's a skill in itself. It's a highly complex area. And so when you're interviewing for a new cashier, just think about how you're actually going to go about that. How are you going to actually assess that? And are you perhaps better off, bringing in some expert help from perhaps your external accountants? But certainly don't just try and assess somebody based on gut feel. It's far too kind of dangerous from the perspective of internal fraud, but also, of course, from the perspective of mistakes and errors and therefore compliance issues. You've got to consider about once you've actually brought them in, how are you going to monitor and supervise them? I mentioned that earlier. You've got to support them. So when they're a cashier in a sort of smallish law firm, perhaps they're on their own in that firm, how are you going to support them and make sure that you're giving them answers if they need help, how are you going to monitor and supervise them remotely? So not just the capability of knowledge, but also how are you actually going to keep an eye on what they're doing? Is the tech in place to support what they're doing? And how are you going to help them with the stress of being that kind of single point of reliance by the firm? From a security perspective, what kind of training have you got in place so that you're making sure that you're watching out for any potential for internal fraud, but also how are you training them to be aware of external fraud? And that's where we come to technology. So some of the things around technology obviously relate to accreditation. The rules require you to have measures in place. We actually have Cyber Essentials Plus accreditation, but the standard that's required is actually lower than that at Cyber Essentials sort of level. We would say that you're better off, the higher accreditation you can get, the better. Email communications, obviously, again, within conveyancing sector are absolutely fundamental to managing risk, because your email communication is frankly vulnerable. These days, with the phishing attacks and the increasing sophistication of cyber threat, emails themselves, particularly passing around details of accounts or finances, they're just open to attack. We created our own secure portal for communication, and we found that that's really helped our clients, not just in relation to cyber, but also in relation to efficiency and certainty of information. Another risk around technology is the use of a new system. So you bring a brand new case management system in, and it's great for the fee earners perhaps, but what about expertise around the accounts area? And if you lose your cashier, whether they retire or they go elsewhere, and you're on a particular system, when you're interviewing someone, that's another element that is tricky. Are you able to find a cashier that has got the relevant expertise on the particular system? Because if they've got expertise on other systems but not on the specific one that you're on, it can cause real problems, not just in functionality and in practical movement of money and posting, etc., but also in things like data. So that, are you actually able to trust your reconciliations? Are you able to trust the reports that you're getting at the month end upon which you make business decisions? Technology, again, training for everyone. I've noticed the spelling mistake there, apologies, but training absolutely crucial, making sure that everyone participates, and that you don't have people who are saying that they don't want to use that system. Really lead from the front and make sure that everyone's picking up those opportunities. Looking at improving your efficiency and your data accuracy, consider whether your operating model needs a redesign. Many firms post-COVID really thought about what their operating model was and whether in fact they needed to operate in the way they always had. So firms have looked at hybrid working, at kind of sharing responsibilities for, if it's a large firm, then we often support those large teams of finance people with our own support services, so they can kind of flex and scale with us, but they've got their core team internally. We can operate in that way, and it's often viewed as a very useful methodology. If you've got the system, then obviously it should be the right system for you, and you should be then using the process capabilities that it gives you. Clearly, in the conveyancing world, the use of workflows is not a new thing, but absolutely you want to make sure that you're optimizing those workflows and using them properly. It frees up your fee earners to think, but it also supports them so that they're taking the right steps at the right time. In conveyancing, more than possibly any other sector, the customer experience is key. When your reviews take place at the end of your matter, you want those customers to be giving you 5-star reviews, and again, that is partially kind of reliant upon how they experience things around completion. For example, we all know that the customer, when they reach completion day, is sat there with their removal van. They don't want to hear that there are delays with the money being moved, etc. Make sure that your data is accurate. So when you're using the technology and the processes that you're utilizing, get that data right when it's going in, get it done in real time rather than stockpiling any postings, etc. Because then when you're looking at that data as an owner of the business, you can trust the data and make decisions based on it. Often, speaking as an ex-lawyer and an ex-partner in a law firm, the issue is that the reports that come out of the system may well not be in a form that is helpful or particularly kind of useful for law firm owners, because they're looking at raw data rather than kind of things that say, you might want to watch out for your cash flow over the next 2 or 3 months, or you perhaps want to have a look at performance of that particular team because it's lower than some of the other teams. Get that raw data translated. We provide management accounts packs for a huge number of law firms, and that just really informs the partnership meetings, because they're able to kind of focus on the things that are really important. Our accountants within our management accounts team effectively translate the data for you and point you in the direction of the things you really should focus on. And then again, with outsourcing, one of the things you can gain is reaping the financial benefits of efficiency. So again, we or any outsourcer can provide right person, right task, and that can be massively helpful when achieving cost effectiveness. These days, reputational risk is massive. Modern buyer behavior means that you will have people sat on their sofa in an evening wanting to make an inquiry about using you to buy or sell their house. What's your website like? What's the information like on there? Are they able to communicate via a chat bot? And if they make an inquiry, who takes that initial inquiry, whether that's during the day or in an evening? Is it somebody who is well informed, very professional, friendly? Are they able to provide useful immediate information and perhaps immediate quotes? All that communication quality all relates to the immediate and early stage engagement, and it starts building that relationship with your client. It's all part of their view of the customer journey, and getting it right means that A, you're likely to land the person as a client, but B, it starts forming that relationship, which might get you the 5-star review at the end. And on that point, make sure that, particularly when the client's had a particularly happy experience, make sure you get them to do a review. Those things really, really count. And equally, if things have been going wrong, make sure you've got a really good process in place to pick that up, to handhold that client, to understand where their complaints were and try and resolve them, because those are the people you don't want going on and leaving 1-star reviews. Ensuring compliance. So again, from a risk perspective, speed and efficiency can't be at the expense of compliance. You've got to do the things in the right way. And who's taking responsibility for that? You might well have a Cashroom manager, or you might have a COFA, but the fact is, well, you will have a COFA, but don't just say it's their responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. The firm is responsible, and therefore everyone within it. Make sure that everyone's up to date with GDPR and AML. Make sure your training is done well, and same goes for your accounts rules. Make sure that your people are constantly updated with the right regulation. Again, outsourcing your function can take care of these headaches for you. And then have a disaster plan. So if you suddenly don't have resource, make sure you've got a plan. Don't keep it in a drawer on an office server. What if the building burns down and your plan is actually in that building? Make sure you've got the plan that deals with things like a sudden loss of tech, or a sudden loss of finance function, or a sudden loss of a key individual. Have something planned. Again, from a flexible, scalable resource perspective, if you suddenly have a spike of activity, that can in fact be a massive disaster for some firms, because it can really detrimentally impact the ability to deliver service, and quality service at that. So having that scalable resource, really important. And again, that's part of the solution that is provided by outsourcing. Again, technology can be used to support that resilience, and make sure that your disaster recovery plan is communicated to staff so that they all understand how that works. It's a real whistle-stop tour. If you've got any questions at all and you want to talk about some of the things that we can do, I've only scratched the surface. Our tech really is cutting edge now and is really supporting huge volumes of conveyancing transactions, particularly with things like our recent development of confirmation of payee, which is unique to us, but our clients are really benefiting from that. So by all means, reach out. Be delighted to have a confidential chat and see if we could help you. Thank you for listening, and hope you enjoy National Conveyancing Week.